in them times they'd be sad and feeling bad, and they'd sing blues. They didn't know how to sing nothing else, but that old feeling come to 'em. That's what they call the blues, that old feeling. I don't guess they know what they had to say, but they began to sing. And it's just words they would put together and sing a song, just a feeling. They'd make it up, and they didn't know what it's done itself, hardly, but it's just getting a good feeling to 'em, see? And that's what the blues come from.
The American Civil War ended in 1865, and in that same year, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished the practice of slavery throughout the country, and millions of former slaves were freed. The next few decades were an era of Reconstruction, meant to reunite the Union and integrate into society the black population that had made up the majority of former slaves. But 20 years later, Reconstruction was officially over, and a trip to the Deep South would reveal a country that did not look much different than it had before the war. Slavery had been abolished in name only, and it was replaced with sharecropping, Jim Crow laws, and prison work camps and chain gangs. And that was the world that Hughie Ledbetter grew up in.
When I was a little baby, my mother rocked me in the cradle, and I'm old confused at home. When I was a little baby, my mother would rock me in the cradle, and I'm old confused at home.
Hughie Ledbetter, who later became known as Leadbelly, was born on a plantation in northern Louisiana around 1888 or 1889. His parents were tenant farmers for the first few years of his life, but when he was about 6 years old, they were able to buy their own small farm in eastern Texas. It was around that same time that Hughie picked up his first musical instrument, an accordion given to him by his Uncle Terrell. It wasn't long before he learned to play not just the accordion, but the piano, mandolin, harmonica, and the guitar as well. He quit school at around 12 or 13 years old to go work for his father in the cotton fields. And when he was 16, he moved out on his own down to Shreveport, Louisiana. And that's where he earned a living playing at Sookie Jumps and other parties in the streets of Shreveport.
I want Hughie to tell you about the way they put on the square dances down in Louisiana when he was a boy growing up in the backwoods. Hughie, what did they call square dances?
Call them Sookie Jumps.
Why did they call them Sookie Jumps?
Well, because they danced so fast. The music was so fast, and the people had to jump, so they always call them Sookie Jumps.
Do you know what Sookie means?
Sookie, well, that's a cow sometime when you tell it Sookie, you know, sooking the cow away.
Leadbelly played all up and down Texas and Louisiana from about 1904 to 1915. But then in 1915, he was involved in some sort of altercation. He got arrested and was sentenced to 30 days of hard labor in the Texas chain gang. Going back to the days before the Emancipation Proclamation, the people living in slavery would be working in the fields or out on the railroads or wherever there was work to be done, and a lot of times they would sing. But mostly it was just a way to pass the time, but in some cases, like building railroads, it was also a way to set the pace of the work. So when slavery continued after the war, thanks to that little section of the 13th Amendment that says except as punishment for a crime. Well, those old work songs, they continued as well.
When you see me, ha, Lord, I'm a strike ha, tell the water boy run, Lord, water boy run, ha, when you see me, ha, loving, I'm a strike ha, tell the water boy run, Lord, water boy run.
Well, Leadbelly didn't end up spending too much time on the chain gang. After serving just 3 days of his sentence, he escaped. But he took some of those old work songs with him, and you can hear it in his rendition of Take This Hammer, which is a song about running away from the chain gang. He even provides the sound of hammers hitting railroad spikes, which the workers would use to stay in sync with one another.
This hammer and carry to the captain. Take this hammer and carry to the captain. Take this hammer and carry to the captain. You tell him I'm gone. You tell him I'm gone.
Well, after escaping from the chain gang, Leadbelly lived the next few years in Texas using the fake name Walter Boyd. Old Walter picked up right where Hudie had left off, earning a living with his guitar and working the cotton fields when he needed some extra income. But the Walter Boyd days came to an end in 1917 when he shot and killed a man in Dallas. Leadbelly was convicted of murder and given a sentence of 7 to 30 years.
Leadbelly was a many-time murderer, and most people don't understand that. But this country down here was the last American frontier. It was Deadwood City still in 1930 and 40. Everybody carried guns, and there were shootouts every night everywhere. And if a dead man got shot at a crap game, they'd sit on him and keep right on shooting. That was the big folk tale of down here. That was the way it was. So that was the background of all of these people. And Leadbelly came from, the wild frontier out there on the border of Texas and Louisiana. And you had to be a scrapper and a fighter to maintain yourself.
Well, this time there was no escaping the Texas State Prison farm like he had from the chain gang. But he did find another way to get out of prison early. In 1924, the governor of Texas paid a visit to the prison, and Leadbelly was allowed to play him a few songs, including a special song he had written asking the good governor for a pardon. Well, the governor was so impressed that a few months later, in 1925, he granted Leadbelly his pardon. By the time he was released, he had served 6 years, 7 months, and 8 days out of his minimum sentence of 7 years.
John, come on, I know where do you know? Well, I know about a Avon and a dress she wore, umbrella on her shoulder, a piece of paper in her hand. Well, I'm going at the captain, he's trying to loosen my man, let the midnight fish.
So, after being pardoned by the governor of Texas, Leadbelly went right back to performing, now with a few more of those old work songs he had learned in prison. Now at this point in time, with Jim Crow laws firmly in place, a black man in the South would have to keep his head down if he wanted any chance of avoiding confrontations. But Leadbelly wasn't the type of man to put up with any disrespect. So one day in 1930, he got into a fight with a white man and ended up stabbing him. He was arrested again and convicted of attempted murder, sentenced to 6 to 10 years at the Angola State Penitentiary in Louisiana.
Oh, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Oh, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Black Betty, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Black Betty, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Jump steady, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Jump steady, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Oh, Black Betty, bam-ba-lam. Oh, Black Betty.
Back before the days of records, most music was just passed down from one musician to the next. One of the pioneers of recorded music was an English professor named John Lomax. Having already made a name for himself with his book on American cowboy music, John Lomax received a grant from the Library of Congress to document real American folk music. So, with the U.S. government's state-of-the-art recording equipment in the trunk of his car, he set out with his son Alan on a tour of the southern states in search of the true voice of America.
My father had the great idea that probably all the sinful people were in jail. That's where we found them, and that's where we found this incredible body of music that now I think it's the most interesting of all our folk music.
Well, in July of 1933, their search brought them to Angola prison, where they were introduced to Leadbelly. And over the course of the next year, John and Alan Lomax recorded Leadbelly playing hundreds of songs.
Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. Night is in my dream.
That's fine, Leadbelly. You're a fine songster.
In 1934, Leadbelly was granted an early release from prison, once again serving less than his minimum sentence. The official record states that he qualified for early release due to good behavior, but there has been some speculation that John Lomax might have helped persuade the governor of Louisiana to approve his release. So, shortly after regaining his freedom, Leadbelly called up John Lomax and offered to help out with his study of folk music. Mr. Lomax hired him as his driver and personal assistant, and they eventually traveled all the way up to New York, where Leadbelly began to make a name for himself in the folk music scene. Over the next 15 years, Leadbelly achieved a modest amount of success. He signed a few record deals, got a weekly radio show, and began playing larger venues like the Apollo Theater in New York. He didn't always see eye to eye with John Lomax, and their working relationship ended after less than a year on the road, but he remained good friends with Alan Lomax until the day he died. Alan continued to help Leadbelly with his career by booking shows for him and introducing him to some of the most popular folk musicians of the time, like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie.
I am trying to smile once and a while, but I find that it wouldn't do. Dancing with tears in my eyes, for the girl and all with you.
In 1949, at the height of his career, Leadbelly went to Paris, France to start his European tour. But his health began failing him, and he had to return back to the States after only a few shows. He was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, and a few months later, on December 6, 1949, Hughie Ledbetter took his last breath. Let it shine on me. Let it shine on me. Let your light from the lighthouse shine on me.
Going easy.
Let it shine on me. Let it shine on me. Let your light from the lighthouse shine on me. Let it shine on me. Let it shine your light from the lighthouse shine on me.
He had a voice, he had one of these trumpet voices. He could sing, and you could hear him half a mile away. The thing was that Leadbelly then was able to come through because he was in possession of his whole culture. He knew the game songs and the little ditties that he'd grown up with, the lullabies, and he knew ballads galore, and he became a true representative of the whole culture.
Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I guess you're in my dreams.
Although he never lived to see the true impact of his life's work, Leadbelly's songs would live on to touch every corner of the music we listen to today. Just 1 year after he passed away, his good friend Pete Seeger hit #1 on the Billboard charts with a cover of Leadbelly's song, Good Night, Irene. Since then, Leadbelly's songs have been on the charts over and over again, with hits like House of the Rising Sun by The Animals, Rock Island Line by Lonnie Donegan, and then again by Johnny Cash, Gallows Pole by Led Zeppelin, and Where Did You Sleep Last Night by Nirvana.
This was written by my favorite performer. Our favorite performer, isn't it? All of ours? You like him the best?
Oh, and there's a donation basket for Kurt wants to buy Leadbelly's guitar.
Oh yeah, this guy representing the Leadbelly estate wants to sell me Leadbelly's guitar for $500,000.
They're passing a basket if anything.
Yeah. I even asked David Geffen personally if he'd buy it for me. He wouldn't do it. Okay. My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, when did you sleep last night?
Come on, tell me. In the pond, where the sun don't ever shine, I was shivering all night too. My girl, where will you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. Where's that, baby? In the pond.
Leadbelly came from a world that few of us today would recognize. People like Leadbelly had been cast aside, buried deep in the plantations and prisons, where society wouldn't have to see their faces or hear their voices. But Leadbelly's voice was too strong to be silenced. His songs weren't just music. They were the stories of all those people who would have otherwise been forgotten. Leadbelly kept those stories alive, and through time, they've worked their way into the stories of our own lives today.